Hello YouTube, this is Matthew, here again struggling to put out a weekly vlog, hence I haven't put out a weekly vlog for 2 weeks. Sorry about that. Anyway, today I wanted to think about, I guess, the nature of storytelling and but more specifically, whether there are any limits to storytelling. I bring that up because on Saturday night, I watched what some people regard as the most disturbing film ever created, and that would be Martyrs, but the French version that came out in, I think it was 2008. So I watched that, and how I ended up watching it really was I watched a Serbian film with a friend of mine. Another film that is considered and is highly disturbing. So my friend of mine was mentioning that he had watched Martyrs, and he decided to watch Martyrs because he saw some article online about, top 10 most disturbing films or something like that, and I think Martyrs was like 2 or 3, like not on the list, and a Serbian film was 1 on the list. It was the most disturbing film on the list. And he and I were like, that doesn't sound correct. This was before I had seen Martyrs, by the way, but I said that, I was agreeing with my friend because I read the plot line to a Serbian film a couple years back. So I knew what happened in that film. I didn't watch it, but I knew what happened in it. And I was very disturbed by the plot line, by what I read on the Wikipedia page. But I never actually watched it. And so he was gonna watch it. So I said, okay, I'll watch it with you. And that was, at the time, the most disturbing film I had ever seen. I'm not going to go into detail as to why it was the most disturbing film I had seen up to that point. But I'll just say that it explores sex as violence. It explores the dark side of sex. It explores how sex can be used to demean and dehumanize and to traumatize and control. So that by itself is not a cheery subject. Now, from what I understand, there's actually like a sociopolitical subtext to the movie. It's apparently a representation of how brutal Serbian, or how brutal Serbia as a country is. I know absolutely nothing about Serbia, so I cannot comment on that, the deeper meaning of that. But then I watched Martyrs, and I came to the conclusion that Martyrs was the most disturbing film I had ever seen. In fact, I think it's more disturbing than a Serbian film. And I guess basically how I would like describe these films without giving spoilers, and going into gruesome detail would be, a Serbian film is the closest thing to a snuff film you can get without it being an actual snuff film. And then Martyrs is basically torture porn. So, without actually intending to titillate, it's not actually pornography. So, and in fact, I guess to really illustrate these differences, I think would be, in one just basic anecdotal detail, I had to stop Martyrs several times in the film, because that made me feel a little nauseous. So I did not stop a Serbian film once. I watched that straight through. But Martyrs, I had to stop and take a breather a couple, probably 2 or 3 times to process what was happening. Probably because there's more exploration of psychological, there's more exploration of psychological terror, or psychological horror. There's not too much of that in I mean, there is some of that in a Serbian film, but I wouldn't say it's the thrust of a Serbian film. So I was left with the question then. I mean, what are the limits of storytelling? At that point, like, am I gonna say like, oh, these films shouldn't have been made, they're terrible because they depict these awful acts? The people who made the film or made these films are bad people. People who watch them are bad people. Am I gonna be, moral? Am I gonna start moralizing? Am I gonna be a moralist in this situation? No, I can't say that. I mean, it makes me, I guess I almost want to explore the psychology of the people who made these films. I want to understand what, kind of led you to want to do this in the first place. It's almost like they're almost like case studies of the writers and directors. It's like, okay, but I don't mean to be vulgar and psychoanalyze them. So psychoanalyze the creators of these films. But point being, I can't really, I'm not here to make real moral judgments on them exactly. Obviously I make moral judgments on the actions depicted in the movies. But I can't make a moral judgment on the films themselves. Because I'm not really sure that's the point of art. I don't think, I'm not really in the school of thought that's like art represents virtue, and so art must itself be virtuous in order to inculcate virtue into the masses, that sort of almost patronizing view of art that someone like the 18th century French philosopher Denis Diderot kind of said in his little essays and articles reviewing the art of the time. On the other hand, can I recommend these films to most people? No. I really don't think, I can't honestly say, like, oh, you watching this video right now, I can't honestly say, you should watch a Serbian film. You should watch Martyrs. And I think that just boils down to, these films are so intense and unsettling that I don't think a lot of people really want to experience that. I don't think most people. I don't think these films. I don't think most people go to or watch films to have the kinds of experiences that you have when you're watching a Serbian film and Martyrs. Neither of them are for the faint of heart. I'm a pretty sensitive person, so I'm surprised that, I was able to get through these movies. So, so it's tricky. I mean, I guess I got something from the movies, but I'm not gonna recommend them to most people. But I guess to wrap it around to the overarching topic I was talking about, what are the limits of storytelling? I really don't have a good answer. I'm not sure anybody does, because art is so subjective. But I mean, both these movies are completely fictional. Not anything. None of these events in these movies ever happened. At least not the exact events. Obviously, they depict events which have happened before, probably. But so it's not. There's no crime being committed. No one's done anything illegal. It's all completely fictional portrayals of people doing immoral and illegal things. But I mean, I guess at the end of the day, really, my opinion is, I'm glad I saw these movies because it showed me, at least in through the lens of one particular medium, how dark you can go, how disturbing you can be. Because I think you could make the argument that both films they're being disturbing for particular reasons. And, I think if the artist or filmmaker, novelist, short story writer, whatever, if they have reasons to do what they're doing, if they've thought it out and they're not just being disturbing just to be disturbing, if they're not just trying to throw shock value into there, then I can't really fault them for that. It's like, again, most people would not want to watch these movies. If I were a filmmaker, I would definitely not make movies like this. In terms of my personal taste, they definitely go kind of beyond my limits. I guess that they go beyond what I'm willing to convey, what I would be willing to convey through storytelling. But that's the weird thing about storytelling. I can't really say, like, oh no, you can't do this or you can't do that. I mean, there must be some limits to storytelling that I'm just not really thinking of, but I can't really quite put my finger on them. I think the only limits I can think of is if through the course of, you know, making a film, for example, you're actually hurting people or animals. So there's an argument to be made that Cannibal Holocaust shouldn't have been made in the way it was because of all the animals that had to be killed for that movie. And there is definitely a moral argument there, like, oh, you had to kill all those animals just to make that film. It's like, that's not, in my opinion at least, I don't think that's immoral, because you're actually causing harm to living beings, just for the sake of art, right? So again, I'm not saying there are no limits to art. I think there are limits to art. I think the limits to art are, again, if you're kind of transgressing, if you're causing harm to people or animals through the creation of your piece of art, of your novel, of your film. Or if you, what I'm trying to say is, I guess there's a moral component and an aesthetic component, but I think the moral component in terms of when we're talking about art really just boils down to, are you causing harm by creating this film, let's say? Okay, if you are, then probably shouldn't be doing what you're doing, you know? And then there's the aesthetic thing, which is, you know, what's your reason for doing X, Y, or Z? What's the aesthetic behind it? What's the message behind it? What's the theme? What's the philosophy? What's the worldview? Or are you just trying to mess with people's heads? And if you're just trying to mess with people's heads, if you're just trying to be edgy, if you're just trying to be disturbing, just to get talked about, just to annoy people or scare people, that's like, at that point, I'm not really sure what you're doing really needs to be done, or I'm not sure you should be doing what you're doing. But if you can fulfill those two criteria, then I can't really say that your film shouldn't have been made, or your novel shouldn't have been written, or whatever. This was kind of a long, rambly video, but I hope you got something out of it. So, thank you for watching, and take care.